and welcome to the Week 5 Fantasy Football Podcast. This week, we're going to do things a little differently. Instead of ranking you guys 1 to 12, I'm going to go matchup by matchup. I'm going to go, and not by in terms of our fantasy football matchups, but the actual NFL matchups. I'm going to take it and I'm going to say, I'm going to look at each matchup. I'm going to say what it means fantasy football-wise. And then I'm going to give one player on both teams who we should be watching. And then I'm going to give who in our league should be the most interested by this game. So without further ado, let's start with Thursday Night Football. And it's the Colts versus the Broncos. And honestly, this is going to be a very interesting game to watch in terms of receivers production because both teams lost their starting running back last week to injuries. Both teams have kind of had rough starts to the season, not the starts that they kind of wanted with new quarterbacks at the helm. So I expect both teams to try to come out and emphasize that offense, that new quarterback a little more. I expect both the Colts and the Broncos to pass more. And so I think one player to watch on both teams, I think Michael Pittman's the guy to watch for the Colts. He is the guy that is supposed to be their number one, and he's either had really good weeks or really down weeks. So you kind of have to pick with him. It's kind of all over the place. You know, if you look at his fantasy production, he had 27 in week 1. He didn't play week 2. Week 3 he had 15, and then last week he had 6. So it's like either really good game or really bad game. And there's no real middle ground. I think you want to kind of see more production out of him. So I think he's going to be the one on the Colts team to watch really closely. As for the Broncos, I think the one you really need to watch is Melvin Gordon. You know, Williams is out for the year, and Melvin Gordon was supposed to be, their 1A, 1B kind of guy, but he's fumbled the ball now 4 times. And so it's kind of interesting to see, if you look at his rushing attempts so far this season, you've had 12, 10, 12, and 3. So last week after he fumbled, you didn't see the production. But with Williams out, he might see an increase. You might see a little more trust in him. It's going to be very interesting overall to see how the Broncos trust Gordon with the ball in his hands, because they're going to, at some point, have to run. They can't just throw the ball 70 times a game. They're going to have some kind of run plays in there. I think the player in our league that should be the most interested by this game is actually Lucas, because he has Nyheim Hines as his running back too, which and all signs point to he's going to be the guy this week with Taylor out. So what kind of production can he produce not only in the pass game? We know what he can produce in the passing game. What production can he produce in the run game? He's got a good, he's pretty good outside the tackles. The Colts have struggled with run blocking and pass blocking this year. So it's going to be a very iffy game, and it's going to be very one that I think Lucas should pay a lot of attention to. Moving on to the Sunday games, we're going to start with the noon games. We're going to start with the Giants and the Packers. And honestly, this is a game between 2 3-1 teams. Don't really know how they're both 3-1. They haven't really exploded off the page yet. The player for the Giants that I think we should be watching is obviously Saquon. He looks like the Saquon Barkley of old. He's the number 1 fantasy running back right now, and his lowest point total has been 11, but he's had 33, 11, 22, and 18. So those are starting running back in fantasy football numbers on a week-by-week basis. So that's going to be interesting to see. The other thing is, for him, is it's the production out of the backfield too in the passing game. I mean, so far this season, he's had 15 receptions, right, for close to 100-something yards. So he's still showing that ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. For the Packers, the player that I think we should be watching is Romeo. It's Doubs. Yeah, Romeo Doubs. That's what we're going to call it. Okay. This is critical. And here's kind of my, there's 2 critical numbers for Doubs that we should be watching. And it's 89 and 96. Those are the percentage of snaps he's played over the past 2 weeks, respectively. So you see that increase in the percentage of time he's on the field for the Packers going up each individual week. He's becoming a fixture in the Green Bay offense, and he's the Green Bay pass catcher that I think we should all be watching. He's found the end zone now in back-to-back games, and he looks like the guy that Rodgers wants to go to. And what could be a very offensive battled game. Rodgers is at one point, you feel like Rodgers is going to want to go to this guy. He's going to be the one that wants to go and try to find him in the air at some point. The person in our league that I think should be watching this game closely is Jack. He's got Rodgers on his bench right now, which, right? But you've had, you started Carr one week and Rodgers played better. Then you started Rodgers and Carr played better. So you want to almost see that. You want to figure out which one's going to be your quarterback you're going to start every week. And I think you need to watch. You're going to be the one that's most interested in watching to see how Rodgers does in this game. Moving on to the actual noon games. That game was actually at 8:30 because it's in London. The Steelers and the Bills. And this is going to be an overall interesting game. Obviously, the player to watch for the Bills is Josh Allen. He's just the guy. I mean, the fact that he's leading the team in rushing yards, right, is ridiculous through 4 weeks. They have no run game unless their run game is their ridiculously long, tall, strong quarterback. The player to watch for the Steelers for me is it George Pickens? Yeah, George Pickens. He's talented, man. He top 10 play on it feels like on a weekly basis. But his opportunity in quarterback play has been questionable. Week 1 and 2, he only had 5 total targets. But over the past 2 weeks, he's actually had 15 targets. And he had 6 catches in week 4 for 102 yards. I think with Pickett now being the quarterback in that Steelers offense, you're going to see more passes. You're going to see a lot more airing the ball out. So it's going to be interesting to see if Pickens is the guy that you want to go to. And is he a proven fantasy football starter yet? No. You can expect improved overall output because it can't get much worse. He's the exact type of the bench stash kind of guy you would love to have right now. Honestly, I think the player that's going to be the most interested in watching this game is once again Jack, because we talked about how productive and what we feel like the Steelers offense is going to be now that Pickens is at quarterback and they're going to start throwing the ball more. But you still have Najee Harris as your running back 1, and you want to see what his production is in the run game, but maybe you'd like to see a little more production in the pass game. He didn't get any targets last week against the Jets, and so far this season, he only has 10 receptions, and he's only been targeted 11 times. As for running the ball, he's not capped. He's had 10, 15, 15, and 18 attempts, so far this week. So it's not terrible. You'd like to see a little more production. This might be one that you're watching very closely to determine if this is the guy you want to be your running back 1, or if you want to maybe try to move him down to running back 2 and improve there. So I think you're going to be the one that's watching this game the most closely. As for the Chargers and the Browns, this is another interesting one. For the Browns, I think it's got to be Amari Cooper, right? Cooper's had either really, really strong weeks or he's just disappeared completely. In terms of yards this season, he's had 17, 101, 101, 9. So I think that kind of tells you that he's either boom or bust when it comes to fantasy football output. As for the Chargers, I think it's Eckler. Eckler, that Chargers offense runs through Herbert. There's no doubt about that. But Eckler is still one of those guys that you're not going to see a ton of yard production. He doesn't get a lot of yards per carry, but he's effective in both the pass and the run game, which helps him get those points. And the big thing was last week he had 3 touchdowns, and he hasn't found pay dirt all year till last week, which helped with a 34-point explosion. But you do see it, in terms of production, he still had 11, 18, 13, and 34. So, Yes, the 34 is that weird outlier because of all the touchdowns, but you still see him being effective in both the run and the pass game. I mean, he's had 18 touches week 1, week 2 he had 23, week 3 he had 8, he had 12, and then week 4 he had 19. So he still gets a ridiculous amount of touches in both the pass and the run game combined. The player that in our league that I think is going to be the most interested in this game is me, and that's just because of who my quarterback running back one combo is. It's Herbert and Eckler. You know, Sydney said it before when he did the power rankings. I've said it before when I've done the power rankings. My team will go as far as Justin Herbert will let me take them. You know, if Herbert has a huge week, makes winning my game a lot easier. When he has a down week, I can struggle. But overall, my team's kind of up and down, up and down. Herbert's been the consistent this year, so if Herbert goes, we go. So I think I'm going to be the one that's going to be the most interested in that Chargers-Browns game. The Bears and the Vikings. This one's interesting because I'd like to see what Khalil Herbert does for the Bears. He's steadily gotten more production, and it's not like he's all over the place. He's actually had a pretty solid season so far. Hold on, let me pull up his numbers. He's running back 13. You've seen it. You know, the first 2 weeks he struggled in terms of rushing with only 9 attempts and then 4 attempts in week 2. But since then, he's had 39 attempts in the next 2 weeks when it comes to actually just rushing the ball. Receiving, you'd like to see a little more production out of the receiving end of it, out of the backfield for him, because we are in a PPR league, but he's running the ball really well. You know, he had 157 in week 3, 77 last week, so that production is going up. You'd like to see that. As for the Vikings, it's obviously Thielen, because I think Thielen and Jefferson are really the only two guys that on that Vikings team that we have rostered. Oh, wait, Dalvin Cook. I have Dalvin Cook rostered. But you know what you get out of Jefferson. You feel like you know what you get out of Dalvin Cook. It's Thielen. Thielen is the guy that he's either way up, way down. Way up, way down. I mean, if you look at it, 3 receptions, 4 receptions, 6 receptions, 8 receptions. Are those productive numbers? Some of them are. You know, the 6 for 61 and a touchdown is a good week. The 8 for 72 is a good week, but when you have 3 for 36 or 4 for 52, it's just not productive. He's the guy that he's the number 2 in Minnesota. He's still a solid wide receiver. I mean, he averages 12 points a game, which is fine. But you want to see more production out of him if you're going to keep him in your wide receiver 1 spot, which is why I think Lucas is going to be the person that has the most interest and the most weight in that game, because he has Thielen as his wide receiver 1, and when he's only producing 12 points a game, you'd like to see more, especially with, you know, your running backs being kind of questionable with injuries, and there's not a lot of proven stuff outside of Josh Allen. So, Lucas, it's, you know, you're going to be the one that's watching this game. I think that's plain and simple. And that's not just because you're a Vikings fan. Moving on to the Lions and the Patriots. This is an interesting game. For the Patriots, is there really anybody that we're sitting there going, yeah, we got to watch them on the Patriots in terms of fantasy? Because it's, you know, when Nelson Aguilar is your leading receiver with 14 catches, it's iffy. Damian Harris is their leading back with 53 carries. So, you know, it's the running back by committee, the wide receiver by committee thing. You know, Mac Jones is right? No one starts Mac Jones. The Lions are the interesting team to watch because there's quite a few players on that team that are just, you have to kind of pay attention to. I mean, start at the quarterback position. Jared Goff. I mean, what in the world has he been doing? I mean, he's had 215, 256, 277, 378. Like, that's impressive. And the fact that his touchdown, he has 11 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Like, he's had a very solid start to the season. I mean, he's quarterback number 4 right now in terms of fantasy. He's had a great season. Then you go to Jamal Williams, who is supposed to be the number 2 back, but DeAndre Swift's hurt, and, you know, that's an interesting dynamic to watch because they're both very productive at what they do. I mean, Williams is not only productive in the pass game, he's the guy they give the ball to when they try to score. I mean, he's had 11 attempts, 12 attempts, 20 attempts, 19 attempts. And he has 6 touchdowns right now, which is why he's so high. He's the guy that they give the ball to in the red zone, which also brings up the point of DeAndre Swift. I mean, it's one of those things to where you thought, you know, he had a great season last year. When he's healthy, he's had a good season this year, but it's that split back thing kind of creates an interesting dynamic. And then obviously you have TJ Hawkinson, which I think last week he was like the top pass catcher last week. And watching that game, I was like, Jared Goff, please throw the ball to somebody else. I mean, he had 8 receptions, 179 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's had iffy weeks, but last week he just went off. So that whole Lions team is just in this weird situation where they're like, I think they're leading the league in scoring, but yet they're somehow still like magically like, what's their record? I think they're 1-3, but like they have a ridiculous amount of like scoring potential, which is absolutely like interesting and crazy to see. So overall, the person that I think is going to be the most interested by this game, I hate to pick the same person again, but I've picked like 3 people the whole time. I think it's Jack. Hawkinson had a very promising week last week. I think this week shows, was that just a one outlier thing, or is it going to be the new constant for this team? Moving on to the Saints and the Seahawks. This is an interesting one because, if I'm not mistaken, I think DK left the game last week. I think he's fine. But overall, it's a very interesting situation. For the Saints, Olave is the guy. He's their number 1. I think he's the guy that everybody's trying to watch and figure out because he is so young, and that if he can stay at the pace that he's at and stay productive, he might be a guy that you think about keeping. You know, or if you don't keep him, he's a guy that you're definitely going to look to draft early on, especially a team that might be struggling a little bit. Drafting him with the potential to keep him for a few years. I think that's what we're kind of aiming for here. In terms of for the Seahawks, I think it's Lockett. Lockett had a horrendous week 1. 3 catches, 28 yards, 6 points. God, it hurt. But since then, he's had 19, 16, and 13. So he's had 3 solid weeks following. And it's really, really, really nice to see, especially considering for me, who has Lockett on the team. In terms of the player that I think is going to be the most interested in watching this game, I think it's going to be me because of the Tyler Lockett situation. You're looking for wide receiver help, top to bottom. You know, you've got solid guys. I would like to have a proven number 1, and you watch every Houston game, every Seattle game, every Tennessee game, every Rams game, hoping and praying that one of those guys can eventually just be like, yeah, I'm the number 1 that you needed. Because nobody wants to trade with you. Nobody wants to trade with me, and it hurts my soul. I told Rob the other day, so far this season, I've gone after 5 different wide receivers from somebody else's team, and they just won't let me have them. So, yeah, Lockett for me. So it's going to be me watching the Seattle game probably the most intensely. Moving on to the Dolphins and the Jets. This is a game that is going to be very, very interesting to watch. In terms of, for the Dolphins, the player that I'm most interested in, or that we should all be the most interested in, I think is Raheem Mostert. I think he's taken over the production in the backfield for the Dolphins. I mean, last week you saw him get 17 realistic touches. Edmonds has been okay. I don't think he's been the proven guy in that offense, which is not fun to say. But I think Mostert's starting to take over that role as the guy. So I think he's the one to watch. And then for the Jets, I think it's Breece Hall. But his usage spiked in week 4 with the decisive snap edge over Michael Carter. Hall had 45, Carter had 29, and he had a career-high 17 carries. I kind of told you at the beginning of the year there was going to be, I feel like Breece Hall was going to have that split snap, but I felt like he was going to win the job by season's end. He's a lineup lock for me in week 5, which I think is pretty obvious to say. So I feel like the person that's going to be the most interested in watching this game is Tommy, because you want to see what Breece Hall does. He got that max production. He's been solid as a running back with double-digit point efforts every single week. So maybe you see that increased role now that we believe he's going to be the number 1 back in New York. How many more Sunday? So moving on to the next Sunday game, noon game, we've got the Falcons and the Bucks. This is interesting because I think this is going to be a Bucks blowout. The player to watch for the Bucks, I think, is Chris Godwin. Let me see where I wrote about him. He was on the field for week 1, but he suffered a hamstring injury that quickly shelved him for the next 2 contests. To see him on the field on week 4 was a good sign. To see him catch those 7 passes was even a better sign. But he ran 45 routes in week 4, which is probably the best sign to see for him. He ran the 2nd most routes in the entire league. That tells us one thing. That tells us that he's ready. He's back. He's ready fully to go. With Godwin's propensity for volume, he's a lineup lock for me. And for who has him? I want to say... Oh, for Eric, this is a great opportunity for you to really solidify yourself by getting that guy that can fill your flex spot. Don't get me wrong, Damian Harris has had some good weeks, but I feel like you get more out of Godwin. And with you having Jefferson and Olave as your wide receiver 1s and 2s, to have Godwin fill in as a flex would really create a solid 3 wide receiver combo for you. In terms of the Falcons, I feel like it's either Tyler... I want to say Alligator. I'm going to say Alligator just because it's funny. Tyler Alligator or Caleb Huntley because of the Patterson injury. Patterson got put on the IR, so he's going to miss at least 4 games. The Bucks defense is not one that you'd like to see teams run against because they're really good at stopping the run. So I think Alligator maybe is more important because he is the better option out of the backfield. But I think he or even Huntley might be a flex consideration if you decide to stash him in later weeks because Patterson has to miss the 4 games. As for the player that I think it's Eric that has to be watching this game the most because you want to see what Godwin does. You'd like to see that constant production from him in back-to-back weeks. So if he's healthy and he's the guy you want to go to, I think that's where we should go to. The next Sunday game is the Titans and the Commanders. I don't really know. I don't really like either one of these teams. The Titans, I think it's Robert Woods. He's been productive-ish, or he's been disappeared completely. So to see that, he's going to be the one to watch because he's had iffy weeks. I mean, he's had weeks where he put up 2 points or 7 points. But he's also had weeks where he's put up 14 and 13. You see the production going up. He's only still catching 4 balls a game, which is not fun to see. But he's getting more targets, that's what you like to see. As for the Commanders, I think it's Gibson or McLaurin, either one. Honestly, most of the Commanders are fun to watch because you have moments you're like, wow, that looks like a pretty solid team. And then you have moments you're like, what is this team doing? I mean, for Gibson, he's getting about 14 to 13 carries a game. He's not seeing much work out of the backfield in terms of the passing game, but he's still like one of those guys that you feel like you have to start. Scary Terry is right? He's had 13, 12, 16, and then 3. Like high production, low production. Like he's all over the place. Curtis Samuel's another one. He's been solid every single week. But it's the offense moves through Carson Wentz. So take that however you want to take it. Yeah, just honestly, quarterback play determines this team's production. If Wentz plays well, those guys usually have pretty good weeks. If he doesn't, they are not great starts. So I don't know how you feel about this. Confidently, if you're any one of those guys' as owners. In terms of the players that I think wants to watch this game the most in our league, I think it's Drew. You start to see Henry's production coming back. 22 carries, 114 yards. So this is the time where you're kind of sitting there going, okay, Washington's got a good run defense. They've got some athletic linebackers. They got an athletic front. Can Derrick Henry, be Derrick Henry? And that's going to be the question I think you're going to ask this week. And you've got a pretty good matchup against Scott, where maybe if he doesn't produce well, you still pull out a win, but it's going to be a huge question for you. But overall, you're going to be the person that's watching this game the most. How many more games are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, Texans and Jags. Man, does anybody really want to watch this game? I think in terms of the Jags, it's got to be Trevor Lawrence. He's shown moments where he looks really good, and then he's shown moments where he's Trevor Lawrence and a second-year quarterback in the NFL. So for the Texans, I think it's Dameon Pierce. Just due to the simple fact of you've seen productions go up every week. He had 11 carries in week 1, then he went 15, 20, 14. But even with the dip in production last week against the Chargers and carries, they were down. So he was in the passing game more. He had 6 receptions. Now, they were only for 8 yards, but since we're in a PPR league, that was 6 points for just simply catching the football. He's going to be someone that is interesting to watch over the next coming weeks because we feel like he's the back that they go to in Houston. And Houston's one of those teams where they're going to be down a lot. They're probably going to be throwing a lot. So maybe he won't get as much production in the run game. But if he can stay productive out of the backfield in the pass game, he's still going to be a good guy to start on a week in and week out basis. In terms of the people that should be the most interested in this game, outside of obviously the Jag fans and TJ and Jack, I think it's Lucas. Not Lucas. Where'd he go? I just had it. Oh, Scott. Sorry, not Lucas. Scott. Because of the Dameon Pierce situation, you have Pierce as your running back 1 right now with Fournette. So I think you'll be the one watching this game outside of obviously Jack and TJ, who are the natural Jag fans. 49ers and Panthers. For the 49ers, it's Debo. Because honestly, do we really pay attention to anybody else on that San Francisco team? Debo's starting to see the production again, in both the pass and the run game. I told you week 1 that his 2 targets, his 2 receptions on 7 targets was not going to be good enough. And since then, he's had 5 receptions on 6 targets, 5 receptions on 8 targets, and 6 receptions on 7 targets. So he slipped a little bit early, but like I said, you see more production. As the terms of rushing, they don't like using him as much running the ball, I think, anymore. Unless it's like some jet sweep actions. But the 23 points last week was huge. The 115, most of it came off that slant route that he just said, I'll take to the house for you. But he's a starter week in and week out, so he's got to be the guy you're watching. For the Panthers, is anybody besides Christian McCaffrey really an option that we're talking about fantasy football-wise? I mean, he looks like the Christian McCaffrey of old. Now, last week against Arizona, he only had 8 rushing attempts, but he had 9 catches out of the backfield. So it's one of those things he's like, I don't care how I'm going to get my production. I'm going to get it. I mean, when he has 15, 16, 25, and 13, he's the guy. So the fact that Sydney has him now, along with Saquon, is just insane. Scott, thank you for absolutely bombshelling that one. But the person that I think is going to be the most interested to watch this game, is it cheating if I say Scott? It is Scott, because of the Debo thing, and you're a 49ers fan. That one was easy. To the Cowboys and the Rams. Also, Cooper Rush, man. Just finding a way to win. He's gonna give Dak problems when Dak gets back. The person that I would be interested in watching for the Cowboys, I just blanked on their name, is actually Michael Gallup. It's not CD, it's not Zeke, it's not Tony Pollard, it's Gallup. He made his season debut last week and exceeded expectations right away. Gallup's touchdown play was the one that made highlight reels, but he had a snap count of 64%, which is the most encouraging for people that own him. If someone does own him. Noah Brown remained the number 2 wideout, but the Cowboys relied much more heavily on the 3 wide receiver sets in week 4 than they did in week 3 because he was able to make that return. I bet they continue on that approach, or if they started, or even if they went to 2 tight end sets, I see Gallup becoming the number 2 again. And with Dak somehow magically being on the horizon, he'll be a top 35 play sooner or later. I think if you have Gallup, you have to sit him for 1 more week. If you don't have Gallup, it might be a good option to pick up. I'm not looking, so I don't really know where he is right now. Let me find out where he is. And if he's available, I'm telling you right now, I'm picking him up. Michael Gallup. He is on... Who's COL? Oh, he's on Landon's team. No, he's not. Anyway, but he's out there. He's on somebody's team, so it might be a sit another week and then wait to see what happens. So, he's on Drew's team. Drew, do you want to trade me a wide receiver? You've got way too many. But, yeah, he's a sit another week and see what happens. For the Rams, really the only one that we're going to watch is Cooper Kupp. I mean, the dude is 42 receptions, 402 yards, 3 touchdowns. He almost single-handedly won Jack the game last week, and that was very frustrating to watch, especially late when he only, all he needed was 1 more catch, and he would have, won Jack the game. I was very frustrated to watch. So in terms of the person that's going to watch the game, it's going to be Jack because of Cooper Kupp. Jack's got the chance to, once again, win any game because he's got Cooper Kupp catching freaking anything that needs to be thrown his way. I mean, 13 receptions, 11 receptions, 14 receptions. The dude hasn't dropped to below 16 points once this season, and it was only because of the Arizona game. He's had 31 points twice already this season. Why is this dude just a cheat code? And the other thing is, why didn't we do keepers earlier when he was on my team? But overall, Jack, you're going to be the guy watching that game the most intensely. The last 305 game, the Eagles and the Cardinals. Dun, 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 dun. The Eagles. Can I say the whole Eagles team? Because we know where 90% of the Eagles team is on Rob's roster. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to cheat here. You've got Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders, and A.J. Brown. Really the three guys that you need, along with Elliott and the Philadelphia defense on your team. So it's all, yeah. It's the whole Eagles staff for you it's make or break. Not a lot of details you need to go into that one. As for the Cardinals, I think the player to watch the most is Hollywood Brown. I mean, 30 receptions, 339 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's the guy that we look up every single week, and we keep saying the same thing. He's great, but DeAndre Hopkins has to come back eventually. Like, who cares when DeAndre Hopkins comes back? He's wide receiver number 7 right now. I mean, he's had 43 yards and a touchdown, 68 yards, no touchdowns, but still 6 receptions. 14 receptions, 140 yards, no touchdowns. 6 receptions, 88 yards, touchdown. He's had 14, 12, 28, and 20. He's been unproductive every single week. And we say it all the time. Well, DeAndre Hopkins has to come back eventually. Who cares when DeAndre Hopkins comes back? When this dude's doing this, he's still going to be a good flex start, even with D-Hop coming back. In terms of the person that's going to be the most interested to watch this game, it's Rob. There's no other questions about it. He's the Eagles fan. His team lives and dies by the Eagles. Eagles play well, his team generally wins. Eagles play bad, his team will lose. The good news is, Eagles haven't played bad yet. Moving to the Sunday night game, we've got the Bengals and the Ravens. In terms for the Bengals, I'm going to go with T. Higgins. You know, Jamar Chase is the guy for Joe Burrow, but Jamar Chase has, outside of week 1 where he had 10 receptions for 129 yards and a touchdown, he's gone 5, 6, and 4. So realistically, he's had 15 catches since then. But that would still lead the team. But the guy that, you know, with T. Higgins' situation, is he leading the team in receptions? No, he only has 20. But he's actually leading the team in yards, shockingly. So, yes, did he have a bad first week? Only 5 points, yes. But since then, 19, 14, 25. He's been catching the ball, and he's been doing a lot with it when he catches it, along with putting it in the end zone. So, yes, Chase is the number 1, and Chase to Burrow is always going to be the go-to option. But Higgins is not a slouch either. As for the Ravens, there's actually quite a few options here, but I like, where'd it go? I like Duvernay. He's the guy that I think we should all be watching right now. No, I'm sorry, Bateman, not Duvernay. Because, yes, he had fantastic start to the season. He's fallen off a little bit, but he's really productive when he gets the ball. I mean, if you look at his production, 2 receptions for 59 yards. 4 receptions, 108 yards. 2 receptions, 59 yards. 3 receptions, 17 yards. So outside of that one outlier in week 4 against a really good Buffalo team, it shows that he's the deep option for these Ravens, for the Ravens offense. And, you know, Lamar is effective in both the run and the pass. So I feel like they're going to, you know, teams try to stack the box against them, which is why Hollywood Brown did so good, because he was that deep threat. And I think Bateman is the new deep threat for the Ravens. In terms of the player that should be the most interested in watching this game, it's got to be Drew, because he's got that Burrow to Chase stack. So he'll be watching it, hoping that Burrow goes absolutely bonkers to Jamar Chase. And finally, the Monday night game on ESPN is the Raiders and the Chiefs. The Raiders finally got a win. Took them long enough. For the Raiders, the players that should be the most interesting player to watch for them, there's a few here, but I'm going to go with Darren Waller. He's had production weeks. The 4 receptions in week 1 looked good with the 79 yards. The touchdown in week 2 looked great. Outside of that, he's put up back-to-back 5-point performances. He's supposed to be one of the top 10 tight ends in the league in fantasy, but overall he's one of the better tight ends. It's just you've got Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs behind him. So it's really hard to – it's the split production thing. So I think he's going to be the player to really watch. In terms of the Chiefs, I don't want to pick Mahomes because that's the easy answer. I'm going to pick Juju. Where's Juju? Let me find him. Juju Smith-Schuster. Because you've seen really high weeks and then really low weeks. I mean, the 6 receptions in week 1 was great. He hasn't been able to find pay dirt yet, which really has hurt his numbers overall. But this is going to be a gun shoot, Old West, sling it all over the field kind of game because of the defenses that are on both sides of the field. So this might be the week that he finally does find pay dirt. The person that's going to be watching the game most intently, I think, is actually Jack, again, because he's got Derek Carr at quarterback, and he's starting right now CEH at his flex position. And so, CEH has had a great season so far. Carr, like I said, with that quarterback battle between Carr and Rodgers for Jack, he's going to be the one watching the Monday night game the most intently, hoping for the best, hoping that either Rodgers or Carr has a huge week. At this moment, he's starting Carr, so I think he's kind of bagging on Carr to do better. He might change it by Sunday. He might not. But that's pretty much what it is. And that's it. That's all 16 games. That did take a little longer than the normal ones, but hopefully you guys did enjoy that. As always, if you have any comments or concerns, you can always let me know. Or you can just join me, and we can make things a lot easier so we can actually talk. Y'all don't have to hear my voice on a week-by-week basis. Other than that, this has been the Week 5 Fantasy Football Podcast. I'll see y'all all next week. Peace out.